My name's Catherine Stoner. I am a political scientist here at Stanford. I work primarily on Russia and some of Eurasia, and increasingly on Ukraine, because the Russians won't let me go to Russia anymore, and Ukraine is a more encouraging place these days, despite the fact that we are here, unfortunately, marking the second anniversary of the start of the full invasion of Ukraine by Volodymyr Putin's Russia. In these last 2 years, thousands of Ukrainians have perished. Millions have been displaced within Ukraine, and of course been forced to move outside of Ukraine. The World Bank estimated last year that it would cost over $411 billion for Ukrainian reconstruction, and I'm sure that number has gone up rather dramatically in the last 6 or so months. Here at Stanford, I also have the pleasure of being the Mosbacher Director of the Center on Democracy Development and the Rule of Law, which is just over here, part of the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, which is the entire complex that you're sitting in. Thank all of you for coming today. Special shout out to my class, Understanding Russia. Make sure you take it. Hey guys, see you. I see you back there. Good. You get extra credit for coming here. And if you're on Zoom, make sure you take a selfie as well to show me. It's my pleasure to not only teach brilliant undergraduates here at Stanford, but also to have been able, through our various programs at the Center on Democracy Development and the Rule of Law, to welcome outstanding Ukrainian policymakers. Some of them were not policymakers when we first welcomed them, and a number of them are able to join us. Oh, I can't see them yet, but a number of them are able to join us today. I think primarily from Kyiv, although I'm not 100% certain at any time where they are. Oh, there's one, Oleksiy. So I'll introduce you first. Oh, and there's Alexandra. Okay, great. So I will introduce our panel, and then I'll introduce our moderator as well, Michael McFall. But first, I saw pop on the screen there for a second, Oleksiy Honcharuk, who is former Prime Minister of Ukraine and was our Susan and Liautaud Fellow, Bernard Liautaud Fellow at FSI, and we happily had him last fall quarter, pardon me, 2 fall quarters ago at the Center on Democracy Development and the Rule of Law. He served as the youngest Prime Minister of Ukraine at 35. I'm sorry, I'm giving away your age, Oleksiy, here to everybody. His eyebrows, yeah, okay, there we go. From 2019 to 2020, during which time he introduced important policy initiatives in Ukraine, including the institution of business privatization processes, efforts to combat black markets, and the launch of the Anti-Raider Office to respond to cases of illegal property seizures in Ukraine. He is trained as an attorney, and he has long fought for more effective regulatory business regimes in Ukraine. Prior to serving as Prime Minister, Oleksiy was Deputy Head of the Presidential Office of Ukraine and was a member of the National Reforms Council under the President of Ukraine. And as I mentioned, we had the pleasure of his company before the war began, just before the war began in autumn of 2021, and he joined us last year as well on this panel. Next to him, I can see her, but you can't yet, is Alexandra Matvichuk, who is also an alumni of one of our programs here at Stanford. She is the founder of the Center for Civil Liberties, which is a human rights group, recognized in 2022 as a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. The mission for the center, yep, we can stop them, yes. The mission of the Center for Civil Liberties is to protect human rights and establish democracy in Ukraine and the OSCE region more generally. The organization develops legislative proposals, exercises public oversight over law enforcement agencies and the judiciary, and conducts educational activities for young people and implements international solidarity programs. Alexandra was a visiting fellow with us from 2017 to 2018 with the Ukrainian Emerging Leaders Program at the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law, a program now known as the Strengthening Ukrainian Democracy and Development Program. Now, I think we will also have join us Serhiy Leshchenko, who is an advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff. Serhiy was formerly a journalist with Ukrainska Pravda and a member of the Ukrainian parliament from 2014 to 2019. He rose to prominence during the Ukrainian Maidan revolution of 2014 and has continued to serve in government. Oh, there he is, in the civil service. He is an advisor, as I mentioned, to President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, and he works and lives in the governmental bunkers since the beginning of the siege of Kyiv in 2022. He is an alumnus of another one of our programs at the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. He was a member of the 2013 cohort of what is now known as the Fisher Family Fellows on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. Do you see the theme every time I read it out? It's democracy, development, the rule of law. It should be ingrained in all of us. And finally, I see on screen as well Sasha Ustinova. Hi, Sasha, who is a member of Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, and she serves as the head of the Holos faction in the Rada. Since the beginning of Russia's full invasion in 2022, she's met repeatedly with lawmakers here in the United States to advocate on behalf of Ukraine, including addressing the House of Representatives on February 28th, 2022. In October 2022, Sasha became the chairwoman of the Parliamentary Temporary Special Commission on Monitoring Arms Supplies to Ukraine. And I should mention, if you ever wonder where your tax dollars go, Sasha is a beneficiary, and we benefit from her having been a 2001 member of the Future Leaders Exchange Program from the United States Department of State when she was in high school. She was the head of the Communications and Anti-Corruption in Healthcare Projects at the Anti-Corruption Action Center before she joined government, which is one of the leading organizations on corruption in healthcare, in particular in Ukraine. Like Alexandra Matvichuk, Sasha was also a fellow in what is now called our Strengthening Ukrainian Democracy and Development Program at, I'll abbreviate it for you, CDDRL, from 2018 to 2019. So we're very happy to have them all back with us. Finally, I'm going to sit down and hand over the microphone from my friend and colleague, Michael McFall, who is the director of the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies here at Stanford, is one of my predecessors as the director of the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law, the Olivier Nomalini Professor of International Studies and a Professor of Political Science, and the Peter and Helen Bing Senior Fellow at Hoover. Most of you will know that Michael served 5 years in the Obama administration, first as Senior Director for Russia and Eurasia in the National Security Council from 2009 to 2012, and then as the American Ambassador to the Russian Federation from 2012 to 2014. I know he always says he got out before the war began, so it's not his fault that maybe you could have stopped it. Michael has also started a sanctions group here at the Freeman Spogli Institute, and it includes international experts who focus on ways in which the Russian economy and politicians can be sanctioned for their horrifying actions in Ukraine. For his efforts, he received a Medal of Honor from President of Ukraine. And I'm not sure where he went, but I know he's lurking. There he is around here, and I'm going to welcome you all again. Welcome all four of our panelists, and hand things to Mike.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you all for coming. There's one free seat now that I just gave up if somebody wants to take it there, so please do. It's great that we have such a big crowd today. But I want to tell you honestly, these are all my friends on the screen. it's not an exciting time to see them today because we have to mark the second year, at the beginning of the third year of this horrific, barbaric invasion of their country. But we are privileged that we have such an incredible group of people up very late, and they're all super busy. So I just want to say thank you to you all for being with us today. It means a lot to us. We consider you part of our Stanford family, and it's a really honor to be with you on this tragic day, but it makes it a little less heavy to be with you all. Here's our game plan. I'm going to hand over the microphone to our participants for just some brief introductory remarks, 3 to 5 minutes about whatever they want. This is an update on what's happening in Ukraine. And, you know, if their connectivity comes in and out, you see that happening, we'll go with the flow. Oh, now we're down to 2. We'll just keep bouncing around. Just so everybody knows, we have 2 Alexandras with us. So I'm going to call Ms. Matvichuk Lesia, if she doesn't mind. And I'm going to call the other one Sasha, if she doesn't mind, so that we can keep them clear. That's what we called them when they were here at Stanford. And they're both smiling. They're not being offended by that. So that's great. So, and then I have 3 questions. And if it takes too long, I'll only ask 1, because we really want to give you a chance. This is a very unique opportunity to interact with some of the most heroic people that I know in Ukraine today. So I'm going to be very brief, and we have 2 microphones here, and we'll just try to get to your questions as fast as possible. So why don't we go in the order I see people? I see Lesia first, Serhiy second, and Sasha third. Just introductory opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. It's a huge honor to address to this distinguished audience. We are approaching to the anniversary of large-scale invasion in very difficult situation, in situation when Russia decided to continue the long protracted war, and only officially more than 14% of Russian budget will be spent to military expenses. In the same time, while the US military support to Ukraine is frozen, in situation when Europe can't close the back door for Russia for bypassing sanctions and import Western technologies, which is critical to warfare. And Vladimir Putin openly repeat the genocidal claims in his recent interview and said that there is no Ukrainian nation, that we are the same people as Russians. And we as a human rights lawyer documented how these words implicated into practice for all these 10 years of the war, when Ukrainians, according to Russian army, has to be either re-educated or killed. But in this difficult situation, we have no other choice. People in Ukraine will continue our fight for freedom and for democracy, because this war has a genocidal character. If we stop fighting, there will be no more us. I will stop on this and will pass floor to my colleague.
Hello, everyone. Big honor to be with you, and I recognize this audience in Stanford. Yesterday, I was in Donetsk region. I visited 2 brigades with my friends. We are part of the support group to provide what a brigade needs from civilians. We delivered some stuff. They asked to 23rd Brigade and 93rd Brigade. We were in Mirnograd and Drushkivka, 2 small towns in Donetsk region, and the general mood is quite uncertain. Let me say that the soldiers really disappointed with the lack of ammunition for vehicles, for artillery, which they have to shell the Russian positions, but unfortunately not able to do now because this lack of ammunition is crucial. And unfortunately to say, this ammunition we expected to be provided from United States, but was not provided, has not been provided yet. And this lack of ammunition caused the situation when we lost one of our achievement from last 10 years of the war. We lost a city called Avdiivka. Avdiivka was taken by Russians last week, and they have now some opportunities to go forward. And the mood from yesterday is that within next 2 weeks, soldiers expect a big fight for city called Chasiv Yar. It's not city, it's still a small town, but it's closer to position of my friends. Chasiv Yar, of course, is defended as well, but if Russian will have the same dynamic to go forward, they will have a mess, they will have a bloodshed in Chasiv Yar, of course, using aviation bombs, using artillery, using weapons, which they have more than enough, especially from terroristic partners like Iran and North Korea. And in these circumstances, to take control, it will be easier for them. But of course, we will keep fighting. Our soldiers will keep fighting. The main weapons they have now, it's FPV drones. It's surprising to say, but FPV drone is a discovery of this war. So with drones, which cost less than $500, it can be easily done to destroy a tank, which costs $5 million. But even these drones is in deficit in brigades. So if we continue the same dynamic of weapons supply, unfortunately to say, but we can lose in other cities on Donbass and also in another areas which were even deoccupied within last 2 years. So my request is very clear. Please take all measures which you have in your hands to influence your political elites, establishment, political class to accept provision of weapons to Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention and ready for questions.
Thanks, Serhiy. Sasha.
Hi, thank you so much for actually inviting and letting me speak. And I'll be honest with you, a year ago when I was speaking at the same panel, I was so much enthusiastic because we were planning the counteroffensive. We had been successful getting the territories back. And I think the world was really clapping and standing behind Ukrainians who are winning the war. Within the last year, it is very sad for me to say now from Kyiv, but everything has changed. I think the world is comfortable, and I just came from a meeting with my partners, my counterparts from the British Parliament and government. We're meeting tomorrow, the US Congress people. There will be a big event in Ukraine dedicated to the 2nd anniversary. And if a year ago I was telling them what we need to proceed and succeed, today I'm telling them what we need not to lose the war. And I think everybody's comfortable because they think that no matter what happens, Ukrainians are going to win. No matter what happens, Ukrainians are going to hold. Because at the beginning of the war, everybody predicted that we would last for 24 to 72 hours. Then it was about a week. Then it was about a few weeks. And everybody was shocked that Ukraine made it. And I think now everybody thinks no matter what happens in the US politics or any other country politics, no matter how much munition, how many types of, how many shells we have, how much munition we have, Ukrainians are going to make it. It might be cynical, but I don't think people care much about how many people we lose. When I was telling that we only have 20,000 kids officially kidnapped to Russia, and this is an official number that we had recognized. Those are more than 100,000 that we think is there. Everybody's been shocked. And when we think about the full-scale war that we're talking about right now, people do not understand that the war has changed. It has changed from the way it was in February 2022, 2 years ago. The Russians were not prepared. They thought they could easily invade Ukraine and take us barehanded. And we beat their asses. I'm so sorry to say that and stand for the auditorium. Right now, the war has changed. They know how to fight. They are the only country in the world who ramped up their production lines. I can give you an example. Everybody keeps talking about the tough and strong sanctions against Russia. Well, I'm so sorry. They managed to produce 3 times more. They tripled the production of their ballistic and ultrasonic missiles last year, tripled. None of the countries of the Western world had managed even to double the production of anything. People do not understand that this is a full-scale war, and if Ukraine goes down, and even if we talk cynical, it's not about the Ukrainians, it's about Europe, and it's about the big war that will be there in Europe. And even with this war, I think Germany is the only country who is now trying and understanding to actually ramp up the production lines, open the factories in Ukraine to produce munition. The United States had not even doubled the production. And if we talk about the air defense, and if we do not have air defense, we'll have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people killed. None of the production lines were ramped up. And companies like Raytheon, who are producing the interceptors, which are the missiles for the air defense, are sitting there watching what Congress is doing. And Congress is not passing a bill because they're fighting over border. Now there is no border issue, but they're fighting about something else. This is political. This is something else. And they just do not understand what it's going to end with. And again, unfortunately, we can see the world being divided. And if at the beginning it was about, oh, this is a local conflict of Ukraine and Russia, they'd been fighting forever. Well, right now we see Iranian drones in Ukraine. We see missiles from the North Korea flying to Kyiv city. And you know what the problem is? North Korea or Iran do not have an issue to transfer any of their missiles, drones, or any other weapons to Russia. They don't have to debate it in the parliament. They don't have to think whether it's going to provoke a bigger war or something. We have these debates in every parliament in the world. We have these debates in the White House. We have these debates in the NSC. We have these debates in Congress. We don't want to escalate. That's what we hear. Well, these guys don't care. These guys escalate in Israel. They are providing tons of weapons to Russia, and the world is clearly divided. The problem is, and I'm so sorry to say it at Stanford, it's much easier for autocracies, for those regimes to be united and take the decisions, to ramp up their production lines, than for the Western democracies who have to debate and negotiate. And that's where we have right now to start thinking whether the Western world is not going to lose to those autocracies who don't care about debates, who don't care about negotiations. They know what the strong power is and what needs to be done. And it is being done. If Russia's... So I keep asking my American friends who are telling me, oh, how long do we have to spend on the war for Ukraine? And Sasha, we support you, but we've been spending tons of money. And my question to them was, how much would you be comfortable spending? They said, well, a few percent of your budget, of our budget. I'm like, well, that's less than 0.5% of your budget. It's 0.4% of your budget. I'm not talking about 14% of the Russian budget even. So this is not comparable. But people do not even understand that this small amount of money, they're still keeping Europe alive. They're destroying their biggest enemy because Ukrainians managed to sank 25% of the Russian fleet, which is the second biggest fleet after the United States in the world. And I think at some point we will have to stop talking about what needs to be done, but we need to start doing things. We don't need to debate on whether Russia should be recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism, because when Cuba is recognized as the state sponsor of terrorism, but Russia is not, because a lot of American companies do not want this because they don't want to lose money. Well, unfortunately, when the war comes to Europe, they will lose their businesses in Europe. And this war eventually will cost them much more than designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism and really putting strong sanctions on that, not just declaring those sanctions. When with the sanctions that had been declared, they can triple their production of weapons. I will just stop here. I'll be open for questions, but I just want to drag in attention of everyone. This is not just a Ukrainian conflict. This is a much bigger deal we're looking at right now. We have Iran, we have North Korea, we have Russia standing on one side, and we have the Western world and democracy standing on the other side. And I'm so sorry to say, but the first group is so far more efficient in making much better than the second one. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. Oleksiy, over to you. And Sasha did mention some things happening in the Black Sea. In addition to other things you do, I know you know something about that. So, but feel free to say whatever you want, and then I'll ask a couple of questions, and we'll go to the audience.
Thank you very much, Mike, colleague, friends. For me, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here to speak to you. I'm absolutely agree with my colleagues, and but I'll try to give you maybe another context of the situation. Personally, for me, last year was a logical continuation of the previous one. However, by we, I mean my team and Ukraine as a whole, I believe we have become more efficient. For example, almost the entire last year, our teams was building combat drones, training military crews, conducting combat missions. Overall, our guys completed about 2,000 combat missions and destroyed over 700 units of enemy military equipment. And it's only my team. I know a lot of other teams with even the biggest results. Now the general staff gave us an opportunity to create our battalion. So now we are building a separate military unit from the scratch. It is incredibly interesting task and experience for me, but very new experience. This year, our plan is 10 times more ambitious. We are going to destroy. We're going to make over 20,000 combat missions. Another example, you had the opportunity to witness firsthand on the Black Sea. Mike just mentioned about it. If before we used to damage Russian ships, which kept them away from our shores and allowed us to build a grain corridor, now we are sinking them. We are destroying them totally, which is completely different level of capabilities. In the drone industries and military tactics, I believe Ukraine is already a trendsetter. We are very good in it. If earlier we were amazed by Turkish Bayraktar, now it is hardly used on the front line. It's almost useless. If earlier HIMARSs, American HIMARSs, super weapon, had close to 100% effectiveness on the front line, now there are more and more cases when it misses the target. So the technology race is very fast when you have a war, when you are in war, when day by day you are trying to compete with the enemy. And Ukraine is forced to maintain this very high pace to survive. There is only one country in the world that currently has the same high pace, maybe even higher. That is Russia. And this is very bad news, not only for Ukraine, but for whole our democratic world, free world, democratic camp, whatever. Because it means that the Third World War is getting closer, as Russia has already crossed all red possible internal lines. There is no any resistance inside Russia, and Kremlin can do everything it wants. And Russia, at the same time, Russia is rapidly advancing technologically, and they sharing these technological progress and the tactics with the allies, like Sasha just mentioned, with China, with Iran, and so on and so forth. I don't know if they already have space nuclear weapon, I don't know, that destroy navigation, communication, or power supply, but I'm absolutely sure that they're looking for any way to arrange a new Pearl Harbor for you guys. And I believe that with this space, I remember how this war looked like 2 years ago, and now it's absolutely different war, just believe me. And if 2 years ago, your technologies, your drones were more or less okay for this fight, now it's not. Now it's not. Last winter, Russia was trying to make a shutdown in Ukraine. It was obvious, it was visible. This winter is not. And I think that Russia already understands that Ukraine will not give up. And I believe now Russia is trying to find other weak spots on democratic camp. It looks like they think that the weakest spot, the weakest, I don't know, link, the weakest place in this democratic camp now in Washington, D.C. And it's very sad if they are right. And may God grant the Western elites understand this sooner than during the Second World War. I believe that not Ukraine, but whole free world is in a very dangerous situation because Russia is learning their lessons very fast. And now they are much more dangerous than it was a year and like 2 years ago. Something like that. Let's discuss. We're very interested in what do you think, Mike, and colleagues
Great.
from.
So in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open up the microphones. And at the end, if I have a chance to ask another question, I'll do that, but I'll save it for later. So let's just go in the same order you just spoke, starting with Lesia. I want to give you all a chance to respond to 2 criticisms that I literally just last week, Serhiy and I were in Munich last week, and I had the opportunity to meet with some members of Congress and some people affiliated, former officials from the Republican Party, and I talk a lot about Ukraine, and here I hear 2 arguments for why they should not go through with the assistance package. One is that Ukraine is corrupt and this money is going to be wasted. So I want to hear your response to that. And 2, their response is, well, if we give this money now, a year from now, Ukraine will just be in the same place, that there's no strategy for success. And they blame, by the way, the Biden administration as much about that as they blame Ukraine. How would you respond to those critics about 1, corruption, and 2, this is an unwinnable war? Lesia, first to you.
10 years ago, police gunning down the peaceful protesters in Maidan. Prior to this, millions of people in Ukraine stood up their voice against corrupt authoritarian government who stopped the Euro-integration process. And they peacefully demonstrated just for a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. And we pay the highest price for this chance. And when authoritarian regime collapsed and we got the opportunity to provide democratic reforms, Russia invaded. Russia occupied Crimea, part of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, and 2 years ago extended this war to the large-scale invasion. Because Putin is not afraid of NATO. Putin is afraid of the idea of freedom, which came closer to Russia's border. because all these 8 years before large-scale invasion, we had this chance to move forward on this way, which was underlined by a revolution of dignity. For sure, it's very difficult to conduct democratic transition when you are in war, but we achieved a lot of success in different fields. And that is why, because we was on the right track, and Russia understood that they lost Ukraine, we lost Ukraine forever, they started this large-scale invasion. And in this regard, I would like to remind that it's not just a war between two states, and this is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And with this war, Putin tries to demonstrate that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapons can break international order, can dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly change internationally recognized borders. And if Russia succeeds and enjoys impunity, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in the world to do the same, like China, Iran, North Korea, Syria, and others, autocrats. And because UN system of peace and security is not working, it's collapsing before our eyes, we now entered the era of turbulence. And such kind of fires can emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe. So if Russia succeeds and this scenario comes true, we can find ourselves in a world which will be dangerous for everyone without any exception. And return to your question about goal. When large-scale invasion started, the civilized world told, let's help Ukraine not to fail. And Ukraine obtained the first weapons to be able to defend ourselves. And first sanctions against Russia were introduced into force. And we are extremely grateful because it helped us to survive. But it's also an explanation why we was waiting for a first modern tank for more than a year, why we still have a zero modern plane and have to start our counteroffensive without any possibility to secure Ukrainian sky. Because there is a huge differences between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win. And we can practically measure this difference in types of weapons, in speed of sanctions, in gravity of political decisions. And this is a problem that still our international partners are not set this ambitious goal, let's help Ukraine to win. I'm sure that sooner or later they will set this goal, but the problem is the time for us flies very differently. The time for Ukrainians converted in numerous deaths in battlefield, in numerous deaths in deep rear, in numerous deaths in occupied territories.
Thank you. Serhiy.
I don't agree that Ukraine is so much corrupt that it can be reason to stop the supply of weapons for purposes which necessary and crucial not only for Ukraine but for the democracies, for the values, and for the countries which I believe benefits from this fight Ukraine demonstrated on the front line. Because if Ukraine doesn't, these countries, NATO members, should have to send their troops to borders with Russia, because Russia will easily provoke. And if I hear argument that Putin will not do this because he's rational, he has kind of some measures of this game, I just remind how he killed Mr. Navalny, and it was another example of red line crossed by Putin. So for him, I think it's even interesting to provoke a war with NATO, to show the weakness of NATO, and to play the game. So it's not an argument. And Ukraine is much less corrupt than people can imagine, and comparing to what we had before, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a few years ago. I can prove it with facts. I don't know, do we need it? But for instance, I'm working for Ukrainian Railways, the biggest organization owned by Ukrainian government, state-owned enterprise. And if we see procurement of this organization, Ukrainian Railways, now 75% of them are transparent, and it is direct contract, including one of the American diesel fuel supplier, ExxonMobil. And let me answer on the second question, that it's unwinnable war. It's a weak argument. If we speak in the terms of Second World War, now we are in 1941, 2 years after the Second World War started. And in 1941, no one can expect which would be the result of Second World War. In 1941, countries were shocked and tried to stop evil, which was taking control over lands and killing millions of people around. And no one was thinking about, should we stop weapons supply because we don't see the light in the end of the tunnel or corridor. The same is going on now. We are in 1941. We don't know which will be the result in the very end, but we have to fight, because if we don't fight, result will be horrible. And I agree with the statement of my colleague that, of course, Ukraine will win. Ukraine already won the war, because plan of Putin was to occupy city of Kyiv, our capital, to occupy the left bank of Dnieper River, the 50% of our territory, and plus some seaports on the right bank of the river, and to establish quasi-state, which the best role model for him would be German Democratic Republic, GDR, the country he spent his young years as a special agent of Soviet secret services. This country had some quasi-government regime controlled from Moscow, but at the same time declared that they are independent, but in reality everything was under control of Moscow Politburo. In Putin's case, his idea was to put his cronies on the leadership of Ukraine and to control them from Moscow as well, and to keep Russian military bases around Kyiv, to guarantee that this regime in Ukraine will implement what request of Putin would be in this situation. So he would never stop this attack against Kyiv and against our territory if not Ukrainian soldiers in 2022. So in this case, to make my answer short, we calling for your support, because this support is crucial, and to use arguments that this war is unwinnable is not good argument, because in 1941 countries supported each other without any understanding, but they just did this because it was crucial for future of democracies and future of Europe.
Thank you. Over to you, Sasha.
Like, you know that I was an anti-corruption activist before I ran for the parliament, so
Yes.
I can definitely say what Ukraine was 10 years ago and what Ukraine is now, and this is two different countries. We have created very efficient new anti-corruption institutions that are now supported and highly admired by our international partners, including the United States, like a National Anti-Corruption Bureau. We have more than 600 cases in court against former state officials or existing state officials. So if 10 years ago, I could not imagine a judge being in jail, now we have tens of those judges in jails. We have former members of the parliament in jail. Recently, the head of the Supreme Court was arrested. And it was funny because 2 weeks before he was arrested, he traveled to the United States. And he had a lot of these important meetings on the Hill and in DC. And then I had people complaining to me that, how come you brought this guy and then you arrested him 2 weeks after that? And my answer was like, but can you imagine how efficient the anti-corruption and independent anti-corruption institutions are, that nobody knew that he was going to be arrested. He went on an official trip and he was arrested later, and hopefully he will end up in jail. I can tell you this is a really good Russian narrative about Ukraine as a failed state. There is corruption. Why should you invest? Why should you support? But if you listen to Putin's speech he did 3 days before the invasion, he was talking that these Ukrainians had created with Americans, all these anti-corruption institutions, and they have all these foreign members selecting special people to work there. He was really pissed about it. He was saying that this is something unacceptable. And he was actually admitting that this is something he could not control. If Putin won the war in Ukraine on corruption, he would not need to invade. Just because he failed to destroy our country internally. Because corruption is like a tumor, it's a cancer that is eating a country inside. If he succeeded with that, if he corrupted the state enough, he would not need to invade. Look at Belarus. Look at other allies of Putin. Where the corruption is, you don't need an army because you basically corrupt politicians and are voting and supporting whatever you need. He failed in Ukraine, and that's why he needed to bring his soldiers in. Second, when I hear this, Ukraine is corrupt and why we should be putting money because they will all be stolen. Well, I can tell you that almost 80% of the money spent by the United States, guess what? Stay in the United States. Because basically what you're doing is you're sending weapons to us. You're not giving us money. You're just sending weapons that you're buying from your own producers, and you're replenishing your own stocks. And I was very much surprised when in summer, Pentagon came out and admitted that they had miscalculated on how much they were spending on Ukraine, because the calculations were based on the new prices of the new weapons, and we were actually getting the old ones. I can tell you that when Lesa was talking about new tanks or like new technologies that the United States is providing to Ukraine, well, if you can call a 50-year-old howitzer a new technology, okay, then we're getting the new technologies. The F-16s we're gonna get not from the zero from the United States. They're coming from Denmark and Netherlands. They're in 1970s, 1980s. Well, okay, 40 years old, 30 years old. Well, okay, that's a pretty new technology. It's funny because the United States and Europeans has almost shut down all of the production of the barrels for the howitzers, for artillery, because they thought that would never be needed again, because this is old technology. And now, because the war is actually about artillery, everybody's like, oh, well, we should be doing something. And we're like, okay, give us the blueprints and we can produce it ourselves, because we've been doing a lot of stuff ourselves. You know what we were being told? We cannot transfer the technology. I'm like, what technology? This is technology of 1960s. The most new one we got, howitzer, was 1970s production. The others are 1960s something. Seriously? This is like 60 years old. What new technology are we talking about? You shut down your production lines because you thought it's never going to be working again, but you cannot transfer the technology because you still call it a technology. Well, maybe we should not be producing, I don't know, cars anywhere in the world because Ford invented the wheel, or like invented the car, I'm so sorry. Or maybe, so it just comes, sometimes the bureaucracy and what we can see in the world is people were building the sphere of like international defense, and the rules are built to work in a peaceful period. They cannot work during the war period. It just doesn't function. It breaks. Look at the United Nations. We have Russia chairing the Security Council of the United Nations. The United Nations was invented to prevent the wars in the world. Russia is the #1, I'm so sorry, abuser, terrorist in the world, and they are chairing the Security Council of the United Nations. And everybody pretends this to be okay. The day when the biggest dam in Ukraine was blown up, Kakhovka, when Ukraine was like, when cities of Ukraine were flooded, I just clicked on the United Nations website, and you know what I saw? It was the day of the Russian language in the United Nations. And that's what the first thing you see on the website, not what they're doing to millions of people, what they're doing to ecology, what they're doing to the environment. This is one of the biggest tragedies that had ever happened in Europe. And unfortunately, we see that it's whether we come up with new solutions of how the world has to function, how we have to actually get us back on track, or we're going to relax and lose to the other side, lose to autocracies. We can do it much faster. And again, they don't have to negotiate, they don't have to debate. The second thing you mentioned, Mike, was there is no strategy for success. Ukraine is going to be at the same place. Well, the first thing I can say, better Ukraine be at the same place. Because if Ukraine goes down, Poland or any Baltic country is going to be next. And then it's going to be a NATO country. And then the Americans would need to put your boots on the ground and fight again the European war and lose thousands of your people. You haven't lost anyone so far. And with the small amount of investment, you are managing to destroy your biggest enemy, the Russian army. When I keep hearing there is no strategy for success, well, sorry, Ukrainians had been very clear on our strategy of success. And we gave you the list of weapons and the quantities of weapons we needed. Mike knows that at the beginning of the war, when I was going to Congress, when I was going on the Hill, it was very escalatory to give Ukrainians old MiGs, old jets, which were 50 years old from Poland. Nobody wanted to do that. The administration did not want to do that because that would be an escalation and Putin would use the nuclear weapon. Well, eventually those MiGs came in parts. I'm not kidding. They sent it to us in parts and it was like a Lego game. Get a jet, a 50-year-old jet out of 3 ones. We managed to do that. The next escalation was giving us artillery. When we were asking for 50 years old howitzers that I talked before, the M777, we asked them at the beginning of March and in April. They said, no, it's going to be an escalation. 50-year-old howitzers is an escalation. Well, if we had them in March and April, Mariupol would never happen. Mariupol is a 400,000 people city. This is half of the Washington, D.C. that was eliminated, totally destroyed. It looks worse than Aleppo now. Unfortunately, back then, there was an escalation. Then escalation was giving us MLRS system, HIMARS, tanks. Now we see jets as an escalation. Now we see long-range missiles as an escalation. There is still this understanding that, well, something will happen. And unfortunately, it is Putin telling the Western world what his red line is. Not you telling him that if you kill 100,000 more people, that's it, we're done. We're giving them all the capabilities they need, and they win the war. We can win the war if we have the capabilities we've been asking. And you know what? Your country has that capabilities. Europeans do not have enough, but they have it partially. They have the long-range missiles that we can put down the Kerch Bridge, the Crimean Bridge. If we put down that bridge, we can get Crimea back and put Putin in a much worse place for the negotiations. If we have the jets that we had been promised for so long, we would be able to actually fight them in the east. We would be able again to go after Crimea. But unfortunately, guess what? Europeans are the only ones who are providing jets. Do you know how many jets is there in the world? The F-16, again, 40 years old jets, almost 5,000. Do you know how many Ukraine is getting? From European partners, 0 from the United States. 20 out of 5,000. And they're telling us, go win Russia. Because we're giving you 20 out of 5,000, and those are 40 years old ones. And oh, yeah, and we forgot to tell you guys, we don't have munition for it. I'm so sorry, but we have to wake up. If the world doesn't wake up, if the world does not understand that this is an actual war of autocracies and democracies, it will be a totally different one in a few years in Poland or any other NATO countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. Oleksiy, over to you, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from the floor, okay?
The only message, the only point I want to share is that for the last 3 months, we destroyed, like totally destroyed, 4 Russian battleships on the Black Sea. This is like 4 times bigger amount that United States Navy destroyed for the last 30 years. So come on, guys. Like, if Ukraine can stop Russia, who can stop? Can you show us these people? That's very simple answer to the people who think that Ukraine will lose, don't have strategy, will lose the battle, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's possible. But Ukraine army now is the best army in the world to fight against Russia, because we understand both systems, NATO systems and post-Soviet systems at the same time. And we are capable to to destroy and to damage Russian forces with a very few resources, with a very low level of resources. That's my main answer, Mike.
Thank you. So let's open it up to the floor. Sir, if you could just introduce yourself and then ask a question.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for being here. My name is Casey Leadham. I've been a member of Ambassador McFaul's classes before. Two very quick things, mostly to Ambassador McFaul. I've been following your messaging on MSNBC. It's awesome. It's wonderful. And it's preaching to the choir. I believe we need to get people on Fox News because you need to get to the Republican Congress and you really need to get to the people who are voting for them. Number two, I'm going to be singing Sasha's praises here because the other audience is the Biden administration. They have self-deterred throughout this entire last 2 years, terrified of Putin's escalation, and we have just, too little, too late. And we need to give them exactly what Sasha had just pointed out. Long range stuff. We need to blow up every single bridge, railroad bridge, road bridge, airport, harbor in that area. It's a logistics game, and the Biden administration needs to get convinced of that.
Well, just briefly, but I'd be curious what our colleagues in Kyiv think. Well, I'm contractually obligated, just so you know, to NBC, so I can't appear on Fox. I can't. That's the rules of my contract. But I am very focused on members of Congress from the Republican Party. I was just in Munich. Actually, Serhiy and I were at the same dinner with several members of Congress. I think it was off the record, so I better not talk about it. But our messaging, I think, Serhiy. Oh, Sasha's got something she wants to say. Sasha knows more about the U.S. Congress than anybody I know, so let's let her respond to that. But I'm doing whatever I can to take that message to them. And by the way, I agree analytically with everything our Ukrainian colleagues said. I think there is this complacency we have in our country right now that this is just going to grind on. And so what do we care? It's way far away. And I think we are asleep at the things that all of our Ukrainians have been saying about how the Russian capabilities are building up and getting stronger. And it's not enough just to do what we're doing. If we don't stop them in Ukraine, this will lead to a larger war. And just last month, I was in Lithuania meeting with foreign ministers and from the entire region. And they say exactly what our friends from Ukraine are saying, that this is like the 1930s. And you guys, you Americans, are acting like America firsters in the 1930s when you thought, oh, war, Italians going to Ethiopia, that's not our problem. Japanese going to China, that's not our problem. Hitler goes into Poland, that's not our problem. And then it tragically became our problem. Had we thought a different strategy ahead of time, we might have been in a very different place. And their message, and these are countries that live, Lithuania in particular, I urge everybody to go to Lithuania and go to their fantastic museum about the history of this, to be reminded, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, and I think we're just missing, as my Ukrainian colleague said, they're not asking us for our soldiers. I just met with a group of soldiers in Munich. All they want is ammunition. And so we just got to make sure we bring that message to, Speaker Johnson. And let me just say politically, I don't get why Speaker Johnson thinks it's in his own political interest to block this. Because I'm not an expert on American politics, but I have really smart friends that are. Some of them are in this room. He only has several months left as speaker, right? The worry, as my Republican colleagues told me in Munich, is he's worried that if he allows a vote on the floor, then they'll do to him what they did to Speaker McCarthy. And that threat is real. But the threat is either lose your job in a few days or lose your job in a few months. He's got a very short time as speaker. Does he want to be the speaker known forever that blocked aid to Ukraine? Does he want to be the speaker that maybe his guy will win. Mr. Trump will win. I don't know that, he's got a pretty good shot, it looks like. But who by the time we get to January, you're hearing from our colleagues here, the situation on the battlefield will be much, much worse without our assistance. That he will go down in infamy, along the lines of many of those American firsters from the 1930s. And I just hope if you have somebody in his constituency who's your relative or you're from there, make these arguments to him. I just don't understand how it's even in his interest. Better to be voted down and have passed this bill than to stay in power for a few more months and be known as the guy forever, the Charles Lindbergh of our time, forever for doing the wrong thing. I'm sorry, you asked me, but Sasha, you put your hand up. Go ahead. I want to hear from you because she does know the concept.
Yes, thank you so much. And I know the event you were with Serhiy and I've been recently, a few weeks ago, I've been in Congress, and I didn't promise, I'm not going to say what was off rack, but I'll be honest, we've always had the bipartisan support, and I'm 100% sure if Johnson brings the supplemental on the floor now, it will get at least 300 or 270 votes for sure. But we run into an issue, and again, I support both. I love my country, and I don't care who is it, a Republican or a Democrat, as long as they support Ukraine, they're our friends. And I'm happy to tell them how much they have done for us, and I'm grateful. And I'm also, Mike, I just want to say thank you to you because I know how much you've done, because I think you were the only Democrat at the beginning advocating for the mix for Ukraine publicly when nobody wanted to do that. And I'm really grateful for that. So talking about this bipartisan support, both parties had made a lot of mistakes. If we talk about the supplemental right now, the first ones who did not pass it were the Democrats, because there was a negotiation, and when Johnson was elected, I was back there in Congress on the Hill, and I'm not going to tell you the names, but I myself was promised by some senators, Democratic senators, that we're going to pass the Ukrainian supplemental. So he was elected on Wednesday. The supplemental was supposed to pass the Democratic Senate on Thursday or Friday. And when I was calling senators Friday night, why didn't you pass it? They were like, well, we're going to do it next week. When next week came, I was like, why are you not doing that? And I was told, well, obviously, it all came to let the House do it first, crash. We'll show how the Republicans crashed, and then we're going to do it ourselves. They played too long and ended up being stuck with the border. And that's when Republicans stepped in and started playing. And now we understand that we are a hostage of the internal politics, because honestly, the negotiations on the border started in December when President Zelenskyy came to Washington, D.C. And first of all, I was very skeptical about it because Republicans saw it as a pressure on them, and they were telling, you should be pressuring us, please pressure the Democrats, they need to pass it. And on the other side, it was good that he came because he told Biden that we will be done without your support. And that's actually when Schumer did start to negotiate, and they did start moving on the border issue, because there were no negotiations before. You remember Murphy came out and said, we're done with negotiating. We cannot negotiate it. So unfortunately, we are stuck with internal politics within both parties, because Republicans are saying we are supportive, but unfortunately, we need our border first. And that's what I mean. All politicians think third term. Unfortunately, you have elections every 2 years. I think if you had it every 4 years, for example, like it is in Ukraine, maybe it would be easier for us. But because it's every 2 years, then you have to talk to your constituencies. You need to go talk to your voters. It's much easier for them to explain why you're fighting for the school buses or for the healthcare in your district than why you're fighting to a country that probably not a lot of people in your town can identify on the map. I'm so sorry. Probably they know the colors because it's been on the TV, but I'm not sure they can identify it on the map. And because of this internal politics, a lot of politicians first are becoming hostages. Second, they are becoming populists. Because when I see a politician, one of the Republican politicians, again, I don't want to say the names, commenting the bill of the Ukrainian supplemental on CNN, and when this person is asked a question, it ends up she had never read a bill. She doesn't even know the numbers, but she's commenting on it like she did. Because there are you see the elections coming, and you have to take this opportunity and use it for your election campaign. So unfortunately, there had been a lot of mistakes. On one side, it was the Biden administration, and I remember when Biden came out during the State of the Union speech, it was a few days after the invasion. He came out and said, we gave Ukraine all the weapons they asked, which was not true. And we did the best sanctions we could have done. Well, he forgot to say that they did exemptions at night through the treasury for oil, gas, diamonds, and a lot of tons of other stuff. And then we understand. And then I remember Republicans telling us that, well, I've been on Fox News tons of times. I've been on Newsmax, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. I don't care where I have to go. I will talk to anyone who can support Ukraine. I'll try to persuade anyone, give them the numbers and give them the arguments. But unfortunately, I remember everybody was telling me, don't worry, if you have Republicans coming, it's going to be all fine. Well, it seemed to be fine at the beginning, but unfortunately, it's not fine now. We're stuck. And the people who were telling me that are saying, well, sorry, it's our internal politics. I'm like, well, sorry, but your internal politics are going to turn into the next biggest war on this planet. And this is something you have to understand. Because if you are in power and that's when it's happening, it's going to be your responsibility. And that's going to be your responsibility, but even in front of your voters in 2 years. And it's going to be very difficult for you to explain why you did not vote for that small supplemental to stop the war, not to support Ukraine, but to stop the big war. Sorry for taking long.
Serhiy or Oleksiy, do you want to jump in?
I can agree. I can confirm what you said, that we had a very optimistic forecast from Munich when we talked to some Republicans. But we want to see what we usually say in Ukraine, result on the screen of the football match. While we don't see the positive voting, we cannot say that we are satisfied. And in this situation, I cannot imagine that Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, the governor of your state, the party which won the Cold War, now demonstrates such a weakness. And in some sense, I see very prominent parallels that current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is Ronald Reagan of modern world. He's fighting against empire of evil. He is successful in this fight. Sorry, yeah, I'm back. So Volodymyr Zelenskyy is fighting against empire of evil and successful in this fight. And he just needs your support to fulfill this mission. Of course, evil empire wasn't so easy to win. And you remember it took a decade. It took a decade until the collapse of the Soviet Union. It would be very naive to expect that Ukraine may won Russia within 2 years of this very intense war, especially in the situation when we are not even supplied with what was promised. I don't know, are you familiar with information that European countries, unfortunately, but did not deliver 50% of the promise for 2023. In these circumstances, we expected that our American partners will play the role which we expect to be done for 100%, but now we are kind of in a between two chairs, sitting between two chairs with no real opportunity to get as much as we need. But I'm still optimistic in the sense that we are on the right side of the history. And autocracies cannot win the war against democracies. It never happened within the last 80 years. In this case, I believe one day we will celebrate the victory together in Stanford. And I believe we will meet in person to say thank you for you as a taxpayers who paid these taxes, which led us to get these weapons and to win this war. And I believe you will benefit from this not less than Ukraine. Thank you again for your interest and your support of Ukraine.
Thanks, Serhiy. I know it's very late in Ukraine and we're running out of time. So why don't we do this? I see 3 people or maybe 4 people that want to ask questions. So why don't we take all of their questions together? And if you could all just write down the questions, and then we'll go in the same order that we started. Lesia, Serhiy, and Sasha. And I have one last question I want to ask too. So please.
Okay, Nadia, Brand and Securities and Exchange Commission, and also volunteer for Nova Ukraine. My question is, why didn't sanctions put Russia on its economic knees? And follow up to that is, during these 2 years, which lessons have we learned and how we can fix our mistakes going forward? Thank you.
Great question. Keep notes, okay? Great, Oleksiy's back, so just keep notes and then to answer whatever you want, please.
Slava Ukraini,
Gheroyam Slava.
Ukraine Support Alliance at Stanford. I have a quick question about a lot of you referring to these wars that, like, it's the 2nd anniversary of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Do you find it easier to say it is 2nd year anniversary of full scale invasion rather than saying it's a 10-year of war since Russia annexed Crimea 10 years ago? Is it easier to work with your partners across the Western world and tell them, hey guys, it's only been 2 years of your inactivity, not 10 years that you've been trying to appease Putin, or like take half measures in that case? Thank you.
Great question, please.
Yeah, my name's Jim. I'm a retiree and live in where UC Davis is, and I'm happen to be visiting Stanford and saw this opportunity to see what was going on. My question is really more for the room than it is for the folks in Ukraine. My comments is all the people who fought, all Americans who fought in the last war that America won are all dead now. Okay, that's World War II. Since that time, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, you name it. We've been tied up in wars that we really have never won. So my question to the people gathered in this room who are very knowledgeable is, how much is war weariness? And what has happened to America through our own mistakes over these last 50, 60 years? How much of that is playing into what's happening and how we cannot get ourselves ready to fight when we need to?
That's a great question. I'm actually writing a book on exactly that question, so you'll be invited back next year for the book event. This will be the final question from the floor. Then I get one question, and then they'll answer questions, and Catherine will wrap up.
Thank you. Robert Bueller. My children went to school here, 11 and 14 grads and international relations majors. I think there's a couple references to 1941. This gentleman just talked about World War II, and there's also a reference to perhaps a Pearl Harbor kind of event. So there's definitely some analogies going on here, and dictators from around the world, et cetera. Could you extrapolate on what kind of Pearl Harbor event might we, the U.S., experience given the situation that would cause us to be drawn into it?
Okay, and then my last question is, a lot of your friends are in the audience, you guys, just so you know. We miss you. We want you to come back. We want to celebrate, like somebody said, victory here at Stanford. But we're also worried about you. This is a hard war, and you all, in your own ways, are very involved in everything. I cannot believe you're being so generous with your time with us, as late as it is there. Just tell us a little bit about your physical state, your mental state. Are you angry? Are you tired? Are you, how is Victoria doing? Sasha, I want to know about your daughter. I just want a little bit. Her daughter's named Victoria on purpose, Victory, and was born during this horrible war. Just, we want to just feel a little bit how you are feeling and what can we do to help, not Ukraine as a whole, but you personally. So everybody just take 2 minutes, and then Catherine will close us out.
I will start probably with tackling 2 questions. The first, I would be very honest, it's very difficult, and I'm still lacking a proper word to describe what does it mean to live during the large-scale war. Because large-scale war means that everything which you call normal life, like a possibility to go to work, to hug your beloved ones, to meet you with your friends in a cafe and to have family dinner was crushed, was disappeared in one moment. To live during the large-scale war means that you live in total uncertainty because you can't not just plan your day, you can't plan your next hours because you have no idea when the next air alarm started. Like now, we have air alarm, but I couldn't go to bomb shelter because there is no internet in bomb shelter, and I'm sit here while I read that ballistic rockets are approaching to Kyiv. To live during the large-scale war means to live in constant fear for your beloved ones, because if even your relatives didn't join Ukraine armed forces, and once again, Ukraine armed forces is a yesterday civilians army. It's people who yesterday was journalists, IT specialists, designers, hairdressers, farmers, and they had to take arms in order to defend our democracy, our country, our people, and our human dignity. But even if you have not such relatives, you're also in fear because there is no safe place in Ukraine where you can hide from Russian rockets. So it's difficult, but these dramatic times provide us an opportunity to express the best in us, to become a best version of ourselves, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make a difficult but right choices, and to help each other. And I would like also to tackle the second question about lessons. Samuel Huntington predicted that the new global conflict would arise between different civilizations. But my colleague Sasha already mentioned how Russia is creating the entire authoritarian bloc. Iran provided Russia with drones. Syria voted for Russia in UN General Assembly. China helped Russia to bypass the sanctions. North Korea provided Russia more than 1 million artillery shells. But Russia, Iran, China, Syria, and North Korea are different civilizations according to the Huntington classification. However, they pose a critical common feature. All these regimes that have taken power in their countries have the same idea of what a human being is. And therefore, there is not conflict of civilization. This is a conflict of anthropologies. And authoritarian leaders consider people as object of the control and deny them rights and freedom. Democracies, in opposite, consider people, their rights and freedom to be the highest value. And there is no way to negotiate this. The existence of the free world always threatens dictatorship with the loss of power. And the main lessons which we have to take is that unpunished evil grows. And if we not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further, because only spread of freedom make our world safer. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to be present in this panel. And unfortunately, I have to go to another event, so I have to switch off the camera. Thank you.
Serhiy, over to you, and then Sasha, and if we get Oleksiy back, we'll get to him. But over to you.
You know, what makes me optimism optimistic that news we received today, within the day, just while we were on this call, our military forces crashed one of the Russian fighter jets. It happened a few minutes ago, and 2-3 hours before the call, we also crashed another big Russian flight, big Russian plane, which overview in the skies in the interest of Russian armed forces. So our soldiers have a big success in the area of destroying Russian fleet and Russian plane. And in this case, victory doesn't mean the occupation of small village, but also existing of agricultural corridor, which is ongoing, not because of good Russian will, but because our army defended this corridor from Russians, and our grain can go on the global market, plus our iron ore and our another production for global markets can go through Odessa ports. Again, if you ask about future, it's quite strange to hear the questions now in these days. How can you see yourself in 5 years' time? In Ukraine, you cannot predict yourself in 5 weeks' time. Maybe the horizon of planning is very short, let's say 2-3 weeks, not more. And in this case, of course, I cannot say something more optimistic than we exist as an independent nation now, and we have some territory lost, and dozens of thousands of Ukrainians died on the front line, but Ukraine survived. And this is the main evidence that Russian President Putin lost this war already. He has no plan B for himself. He cannot stop this war just because it will declare his as a loser for the whole world. That is why we badly need your support, and we expect the support going to be provided. Talking about the questions which were asked by our friends from the audience. What will happen if Ukraine loses? It means you will spend much more money to defend your partners in NATO, because next Pearl Harbor gonna be one of the Baltic countries. I can predict it can be a city called Narva in Estonia, with the majority of Russian-speaking population, very far away from European capitals, but part of NATO. And Putin would attack easily Narva with even small support of local population in this town. But it will challenge the whole institution as NATO is, which will make a difficult choice, either to defend or to keep eyes blind on this aggression. And it will happen. You will spend much more money. You will send your troops on the ground, or you will say, we have nothing to do with this territory, nothing to do with this obligation, and the US will lose the status of global leader. And it will be the end of the history, but with totally different result, comparing what your colleague Frank Fukuyama said in his book. Thank you again for your interest and for your support of Ukraine.
Thank you, Serhiy. Sasha.
I will go just from question to question real fast, not to take time. Why sanctions failed? Because we were fooled. I told you, we were told that US had introduced the strongest sanctions you have ever done. Well, that was a lie, because at night, the same day, you did exemptions through Treasury for everything you cared about. Gas, oil, diamonds, agriculture. I can give you the full list. If we had sanctions like you did to Iran, maybe Russia would not be able to triple the production of its missiles. And I'm not even talking about other productions. Unfortunately, US is still afraid to designate Russia as the state sponsor of terrorism. If that happens, that would automatically turn on strong sanctions and secondary sanctions. And we have been asking for that for a very long time. If you Google, even a lot of your political leaders have publicly promised that to us. Nothing has happened. Nothing. Zero. Second, what mistakes are learned? Honestly, not to give up nuclear weapons. We gave them up in the 90s. Well, Putin would never invade if we had nukes. We gave it up because Britain and the United States and Russia said, we will protect, we will support, just you have to give up your nuclear weapons. Well, it ended up nobody's backing us up besides UK and US, but even that is not enough. And I don't think any other country would ever give up their nukes. And the Iranian deal is done, because they will never do that again. 2 years versus 10 years. Why we are talking about the 2 years invasion, not the 10 years. It's my personal opinion that I would share. It's easier for me to explain, especially politicians abroad, about the 2-year full-scale invasion than the 10-year, because people then think, oh, that's been going for years already. Why we should be involved? It's going to be the war forever. We've already had Afghanistan. We've had like other examples that have been mentioned here before. What we need to show is that this has never been done before. I will honestly tell you, when I was told a few days before the invasion what they were going to do, I could not believe myself. You can bomb a European city, bomb in the 21st century. I just could not imagine it. I could imagine tanks on the border. I could imagine some escalation in the east, in the south, but I could not imagine literally missiles flying to a city in Europe in the 21st century. Well, this is happening. And that's what we are trying to drag the attention to. What would be the Pearl Harbor? Well, Serhiy gave a really great example, but I think you underestimate what is already happening in the Middle East. And I think you will end up in the water because, look, your bases are already being bombed by the Russian allies. Hamas had been using Russian weapons during their attack on Israel. So unfortunately, it is already happening. Just everybody is trying to avoid saying that the war is already there at their borders. There have been a lot of missiles shot and drones, drones especially, shot in other European countries, in Romania, in Poland. You've seen that on the news. Nobody wants to stand up and say, well, there are Russian missiles or there are Russian drones flying to us. Well, they're breaking our borders. We should do something about it because everybody is scared. And about the mental health, I want to be optimistic, but I can tell you every second person I know in Ukraine, including children, has a very severe depression and are taking some pills for that. Every second person, I'm not exaggerating, because I don't know a family who has not lost someone or who does not have someone fighting at the front lines. But on the other side, I do believe that the good will always win, no matter what. It might be very difficult for us. It will take lives. And that's why, thank you, Mike, for mentioning, I would never think I would name my daughter Victoria, but I was 9 months pregnant when the war broke. My world crashed. And I live separately from my baby now, because when I was talking to a children's psychologist, said, Sasha, she doesn't need to hear the air raid every night. She doesn't need to sleep in a bathtub because you don't have a bomb shelter in your house. She is 22 months, and I don't want to put her on that pressure, but she lives with the pressure of not having a mom next to her. And I do believe that one day Micah will come with her to Stanford after the victory, and I will show her what we all been doing, introduce you to people who had been supporting us, and I know how much you've done, and a lot of people had been doing to support us at Stanford, and hopefully to show her what Stanford is, and then she can choose whether she wants to go to school in Ukraine or she wants to go to school, maybe to do a postgrad in Stanford like I did. But I want our kids to have that future, and to have that future, unfortunately, and it's not about our kids, it's about your kids, because your kids will have to fight that war. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oleksiy gets the last word. Actually, Catherine gets the last word. You get almost the last word.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'll try to be very short, and I'll start with the answer for the last question. I'm an optimist. I'm still an optimist because I know that Ukrainian army now is the most efficient army in the world. To realize it, I'll give you an example. The daily operational cost of maintaining the average American aircraft carrier estimated in a range from like $6–10 million a day. And to all operations for last like 3 months, and as a result of these operations, we destroyed 4 military like battleships, Russian battleships. The total budget of these operations is less than this operational cost for 1 day of 1 your carrier. So I know that Ukrainian army, and we are Ukrainians now, is a best possible investment. So for you, for democratic world, for United States, for European Union, for all people, for democratic world, Ukrainian army is the best possible investment to keep a peace and to contain Russia as the most dangerous aggressor in the world. So I'm an optimistic. I don't know. I know why sanctions failed, because I don't think that the real goal of these sanctions was to contain Russia. Maybe the idea was to make them scared. Maybe the idea was, I don't know, to send them the signal. I don't know. But for me, absolutely clear that it's impossible to imagine that these sanctions, very limited one, the goal of these very limited sanctions, the real goal of these limited sanctions was to contain Russia, or even to or to shut down the economy. So I don't think that Western elites was this goal. That's why I don't think that the sanctions from their perspective failed. I think that we still need strong enough sanctions, and I think that it's possible, still possible, to find a formula to contain a Russian economy and not to let them to triple their military production. Speaking about Pearl Harbor, I don't know how this next Pearl Harbor will look like, from the space or from the ground. I don't know, from the sea. I know that Russia, as a very dangerous and very experienced aggressive empire, totalitarian regime, they are trying to find the weakest place. And I already gave an example that last winter, they were trying to shut down our, all our energy system. They realized that it will not bring us to defend. So Ukraine will not give up. And now they are not. Now they are not. Now they are trying to find the other way, asymmetric way, to undermine the unity and trust among nations, among free nations, among between free people in the world. So they are trying to influence elections. They are trying to play with radicals in Europe. They are trying to divide, to work on division, deeply division in your society. So I believe that this battle, this war, is not a local conflict. This is already a global conflict. And you guys on the front line, the same as we are, but maybe the temperature of this conflict is different. Maybe you don't feel this as strong as we are, but I want you to know that we are with you. Ukraine is strong. Ukraine is efficient. Ukraine still need your support, but Ukraine is working hard to achieve the victory and the goal for not only for us, not only for Ukrainian people, not only for Sasha and her daughter, but for all free people in the world. Thank you for your attention today, and thank you for your support all these days, guys. We love you, and we are missing the time to be with you in Stanford. I hope next time we will see each other in person. Let's I don't know. God bless America. Slava Ukraini.
Geroyam Slava.
And Sasha and Oleksiy, who had to go, I hope you leave with information and ammunition in American politics, because obviously this is not just a Ukrainian fight. It is a fight for everyone. And thank you all for everything that you're doing. And we hope to welcome you back soon to Stanford or see you in Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.